All right, and joining me today is Aiemann Zahabi, who fights Javid Basharat at UFC Vegas 87. That fight on March 2nd. So, Aiemann, I wanted to start here. Last time we spoke, you talked about fighting a little bit more frequently. We've still seen a little bit of a gap from your last fight, right? It's still been about 9 months. Kind of the size layoff you were looking for? Were you looking for more frequent? What sort of sparked it being this long?
Listen, I'm happy it's less than a year. So I'm going to take my win and I'm going to keep going. I
And
don't think it's a big deal. I think it's good. I think 9 months is okay. And then hopefully, definitely now I have time to get one more in after this one. So I'm really looking forward to that too. So, but I can't overlook Javid for sure. But I think 9 months is not bad. I'm used to a year plus. So this is great.
yeah, this is definitely a better turnaround. And I'm assuming just, like looking for the right matchup, looking for the right fight card. Is that sort of
Yeah.
what led to the layoff?
That plus I think renegotiating too because I was up for a contract, so I think they wanted to see how they wanted to play it and things like that. So I think all that came into play a little bit. So, but I'm okay with the timeline. I think timeline's fine.
That's good. And now, you just said new contract. So give us a little bit of the details. How long? What are we looking at here?
Oh, I got four more fights I'm really excited about, and it's nice to be on the third contract because usually average UFC career is like 2 or 3 fights.
Mhm.
And now I've had 6 fights in the UFC. So I have the same amount of fights outside the UFC as in. And when I fight next week, I'll have more in the UFC than I've had before the UFC. So it's really nice. I really feel like a veteran now. And I'm more adapted to fighting in the sense that I'm excited about getting in there, and I'm more it's just now it's just routine. I feel like the routine has been built now.
That's awesome. Now, I want to talk about that routine. I want to talk about the upcoming fight, but I also want to talk about, what you were doing in the meantime too, because I noticed, you were doing some announcing in the meantime too. I saw you doing
Yeah.
Unified MMA up in Canada. So tell me a little bit of how that came out, and is there a future in announcing for Aiemann Zahabi?
I would love that, man. Honestly, it was a dream come true. Like another little thing I can do on the side. I thought it was great. Out of nowhere, Aaron Bronstetter sent me a message saying, "Hey, would you want to be the third man in the booth with me and John Ramdeen for Unified MMA? It's the night before UFC Toronto." I said, "Yeah, I would love that." And then he later told me after I accepted, he's like, "Oh, by the way, it's a Dana White looking for a fight, blah blah." So he kept a little cherry for me. It was nice, which was cool. And I really thought it was something fun to do because I have a lot of fight experience and a lot of training experience. So I thought I would do really well. And it was funny because a lot of the feedback that I got was I sounded more like a coach in the commentary booth. So that might be my shtick. I'm just giving corner man advice, and then during the fights, some of the guys could hear me as they were fighting and started doing what I was advising. So it was pretty funny. It was pretty interesting. So that, for me now, I'm just gonna start doing I'm gonna start my own YouTube channel. So that's my project for after this fight, and I want to start doing watching the UFC and doing alternative commentary on YouTube. And
That's
see how that
awesome.
goes.
And,
Yeah.
and, and are you going to do that? Is that going to be like a live thing? Are you going to be live providing alternative
Live for
commentary?
free. I'm gonna have the chat open, and I want to do it as many weekends as I can, make time for it, and talk with the fans and see what they think. And obviously they'll probably shit talk me, how things get in the MMA world, and we're gonna go back and forth with our opinions. But I just think it'd be a cool interactive alternate commentary for UFC, right?
That's very cool. I like that. Now, are you thinking about possibly doing that with some people, by yourself, maybe some guests down the line?
Yeah, so the obviously the first one was probably gonna be I'm gonna do a test run by myself,
Mhm.
just to see how the setup is gonna go. Listen, I'm not the most tech savvy guy out there, okay? But I'm gonna have one of my friends come who's he knows tech pretty good, and he's gonna help me set up the first one, and I'll just do like a one off by myself. And then I was thinking about inviting a UFC fighter or other guys from the gym, and things like that. Maybe have my wife do some with me too, because it could be funny because some guys do watch the fights with their girlfriends or wives or whatever. And it could be funny to have that that casual. Like my wife will be the casual. You know what I mean? It'll be hilarious just to have her a back and forth. It'd be funny.
I dig that. I dig that option. Now, I'm curious too, because you mentioned in there, how the MMA world is being super negative, and you seem to roll with that better than just about anybody, right? You're a guy who you hear the haters talking about the odds on the upcoming fight or something like that, and it doesn't seem to phase you. Is there a reason why? Is there a way that you sort of let that all roll off that works for you?
Well, for me, I just feel like they can't fight for him, right? So he's got to go in there. He's got to beat me himself, right? So that's why it doesn't really bother me. And it takes so much time to get good at MMA. Like you can't expect the fans to be that knowledgeable about it, you know? Like, and it's also, there's a lot of invisible traits to be good at in fighting. You know, like let's say like boxing, for example. You know how hard it is to be a world champion in boxing. It's no joke. It's no joke. But you know, you think you can learn like the different punches, and all of a sudden you know what you're talking about. You don't have no idea. You have to learn about distance, pace, ring control, the different styles, how to counter them. Like there's so many little things that it's hard for people to understand the layers of it. So I kind of just like brush it off as like, yeah, they're talking out of ignorance, you know, and it is what it is.
Has it been easier for you to learn those types of things over the years too, being that your brother is, obviously one of the premier coaches in the history of MMA, and just being around him, has that always made that, mental aspect of the game and the layering aspect of the game easier for you?
Yeah, it's been easier for me, and it's also helped me understand those layers. And we're lucky because for us, it's a very open door policy. So we get a lot of greats from all the different facets of martial arts, you know, from like Braulio Estima, Roger Gracie from Jiu-Jitsu to Wonderboy Thompson in striking, Ton Lee in striking, Jonathan DeBella. We had all these great guys coming from all these different facets. And then like in wrestling, we're spoiled with wrestling. Like we have Gia Sasori, he's an Olympic medalist, world champion, and all these different guys coming from all these different places. And they all talk strategy and depth and levels of sport. And when you hang out around with the best, you start to realize, oh, these are the guys whose opinion matter the most.
Hmm.
You know, these are the guys that matter, not the people who watch on TV, right? So that's what's interesting. And but the people who watch on TV are the ones who get us paid.
Yeah.
So it is fun to interact with them and to go back and forth and to have some stuff. Like every now and then somebody will bust me up on Twitter and we'll have a nice, interesting back and forth. I always end up making it friendly in the end, because I feel like I understand more than they do. And if you approach it in a positive way, they'll turn around.
I like that. I like that. Now, I wanted to ask you about having all of those experts in your gym too, because you're right. That has been a sort of a cornerstone of TriStar and what's made it so great, and so many great people have come out of there. But it's not really the landscape of MMA in general, right? There are these teams and there are these groups, and some people like to keep really guarded secrets and stuff like that. And you're either on my team or not on my team for some instances. Do you think there's room for more crossover between these gyms, or do you think some people have to work that other way where they're super guarded?
I think there's no problem with crossover. I think it's very important, man, to be able to stay on the cutting edge because what's so interesting about MMA, it's so young, man. It's such it's a young sport. Maybe it's like so since 1995. So how many years is that? 30 years. It's so young. It's always adapting. Even jiu-jitsu, it's a baby in terms of a sport. So it's always evolving. So you always need to bring in all these experts, and it's important to cross over because you bring in like different perspectives to solve the problems. Because like let's say like now for my training camp, I brought in Jonathan DeBella for my striking, and I brought in Ton Lee. And they're two different perspectives, but they're both world-class strikers. And it's different from me and Faraz's perspective. So we kind of put our brains together and had them watch Javid, and like they gave me their opinions and whatever. And like we built a game plan off us brainstorming all together, right? So because they might have a solution that we didn't see because we don't have that lens, depends on the lens you look at it from. So that's kind of like that's why I find it so important to cross-pollinate with different teams and different styles.
I love that. Now you mentioned the striking of Javid Basharat, which obviously he's really well rounded, right? He's won 4 straight in the UFC. He's got to be good at what he does at this point. But maybe the thing that sets him apart from a lot of the guys you fought before is, or at least fought in the UFC before, is his wrestling seems to be a level above a lot of people that you fought, right? It seems like his wrestling game and his top control might be a little bit better than some of the people you fought. Is that been something you've brought in more people for as well, the wrestling side, or have you been focused on dealing with that kind of funky striking he has?
I don't know if his wrestling is better than a lot of the guys I fought. I feel like Reginaldo Vieira was a heavy duty wrestler, a much more powerful wrestler too, like with pickups and stuff. He was really tough. And I think in terms of grappling, I fought Ricardo Ramos, who's a black belt, right? And I'm not trying to diminish. I think Javid's very well rounded. I don't know if he was the best wrestler, but he's definitely a good wrestler, and he has very good counter wrestling. I feel like Javid's strength in wrestling is more defensive, and in strength in jiu-jitsu, it's more like to get up and free himself. In terms of jiu-jitsu top game and stuff, I think it's more MMA based than jiu-jitsu based. Like I don't know how threatening he's gonna be submission wise as he is going to be threatening more ground and pound wise. I feel like his strength is going to lay more in ground and pound than like pulling an armbar out or something like that, you know. So those are the type of things I prepared for, and I also had I was fortunate to have Ryan Hall come out to help me prepare for the jiu-jitsu aspect as well. Like, you know, if he does take me down, getting up, whatever, avoiding submissions, countering submissions. And I have a really good, you know, there's the Montreal Wrestling Club here, and we have some of those guys who cross-train with us as well. So, like, I have those guys at my disposal pretty much all year. So I didn't have to, like, bring them in per se, but they're already in the room. You know what I'm saying? And I also brought inside Jakub Kakramenov, who's a sick.
Yeah.
Listen to me. This guy is good, man. This guy belongs in the UFC in my opinion, and you know we're gonna try to bring him back in the UFC for sure. And I brought him in specifically to do the offensive takedowns, like have him try to get me on the ground in MMA sparring. Because the guys from like the Montreal Wrestling Club, they don't put on the gloves. They like wrestle me like jiu-jitsu style, like you know like open
Nope.
like wrestling. But I brought in Saeed Yacoub to do like MMA takedowns and things like that, and also have Fred Duprat. He's like a Canadian champion here, 145. I had him trying to take me down. Him too. He's an amazing wrestler. So I had guys for that too. But those guys, like I only had to fly in Saeed. Everybody else was kind of like already in house.
Nice. That's good to hear. That's good to hear. Now, I want to talk about a little bit more about the style, but before I do, you know, the winner here is obviously, you know, you already both got 4 straight wins in the UFC. Pretty reasonable claim to the top 15 in the UFC, right? You're both nipping at the heels of that ranking. I'm wondering, is that something that you've had on your mind? Is that something that you've sort of got penciled in? Is that something you think about when they're going to ask you post-fight for a call out? Because they usually do around this point. Is it something you're thinking about?
Listen, I don't really know how they choose the 15. I know there's like a bunch of, I think from my understanding there's like a bunch of journalists that vote or something, but I don't really understand it. But I know that like I have a feeling like if you look at the websites and whatever, like me and Javid are somewhere in the top 20-ish, top 20, top 25, top 20, between 20 and 30. From what I gather is that like they're putting us together because we both are on a streak, and they're going to see who's going to move on to the next group stage. Is the next group stage top 15? I don't know. Is it 15 to 20? I don't know. But like, yeah, I do think about it like, okay, they're putting us together to see who moves up to the next group of guys or whatever. I don't know how they think of it, but in my mind, that's how it is. So I'm excited about that. And it's really cool that, you know, like, I'm part of that. You know, I'm still part of moving up, which is really, really nice. I feel like my career had a resurgence, and I really found my footing now in the UFC, and I feel really good about it.
That's awesome to hear. Now, obviously, the next foot that you got to put down is against Javid Basharat. So,
Yeah.
you know, you sort of gave me a little taste of how you feel about his style. You think maybe this one winds up a little bit more on the feet, but give me the full breakdown. How do you see this fight shaking out?
This is gonna be more for the fans that like who love strategy and tactics, because I think Javid is has good fight IQ. I think he's very well rounded, like you mentioned before. Striking is really good, wrestling is good, jiu-jitsu is very good. You know what I mean? I think he's good in all three facets of the sport, and I feel like so I am as well. You know, so it's gonna come down to who has the deeper game, who can solve the other guy's problems faster and expose the other person's weaknesses. You know, and like I just have to be ready to adapt to whatever he brings forward, and I have like a general game plan, like a loose game plan that I'm open to him being different than he has shown in the past. Because like in my last 2 fights, I feel like the guys came out and fought me differently than they have, and I had to adapt in the moment. And I kept a loose game plan at those fights as well, thankfully, and I was able to adapt. So I'm trying to do that same thing this time, because I don't know if he's gonna fight me exactly like he fought Victor Henry or Tony Gravely or Trevin Jones or Mendoza or those guys. So I'm not 100% sure how he's gonna come out, but I'm ready.
Well, you know how I usually end these things, and you kind of spoiled it by saying you're going to stay loose with it. But give me a prediction of how this one ends come March 2nd.
Listen, he's got a lot of decisions. He's got a lot of decisions in the UFC. Outside UFC, he has a lot of finishes. Excuse me, pardon me. But you know, I would love a finish, man. Like a finish on him would really cement me up there with those top guys, and it would be really great for my career. So like, I'm not gonna force it, but I would love to get a finish, you know. And I like getting the knockouts. It seems like I'm the knockout guy now, man.
Yeah.
I'm like the bantamweight with power. So yeah, a nice knockout would be great.
All right, well, you're here to hear first, folks. This is Aiemann Zahabi, who fights Javid Basharat at UFC Vegas 87. Once again, that fight, March 2nd. Aiemann, thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
Bro, thank you so much, man. It's always great to see you.